Ko te iwi Māori, tātou ko ngā taonga piripoho o ngā tupuna. Ko te aroha, me te mana, me te tino rangatiratanga. Kia ora. Tuia ko ranginui e tūnei, tuia ko papatuanuku e tākoto nei. Ka nui te aroha ki te hunga kua moi mai rā. Ngā mana e tau nei a tēnā koutou. Ko Miriana Stevens tōku ingoa, ko Ngāti Rārua, Ngāti Rangi nui o ku iwi, I whānau au ki motueka ki konei. Nō reira i te whānau, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome everybody. And thank you very much for your patience because it has been a little bit of a delayed start, but I know that we've got some fantastic Cornwall wines, so we're glad that you're partaking in a quality product. Kia ora. So really welcome to everybody here. It's the first of our Te Tauihu talks for the Te Tauihu Intergenerational Strategy. And you might think, who comes up with these really great ideas? Well, I like to say that I'm part of a family called Wakatu Incorporation. And when I think about where we are in terms of an organisation, we're really here for the long haul. We have a 500-year intergenerational vision, and there's not a day that we don't think about our families, and we don't think about the wider community here in Te Tauihu. So it was in 2017, Wakatu, we celebrated our 40th birthday in terms of a legal entity. And we were actually in one of the best places in New Zealand, and I usually say that as motueka, and it is true. But also we were in Collingwood, actually in Mohua. And we started to think about what does the next 40 years look like for us as communities. And we don't see any boundaries. We see places and we see people. And when you think about our state, and we're the custodian of a large estate, it starts from Mohua and Golden Bay, we push into the Abel Tasman National Park, into Richmond, Motueka, Richmond, Nelson, and then across to the Waido and Blenheim. And that's land, and then we think about water space. We are the custodians of a large estate, so we don't think about 3 local councils. We just think of a place that we absolutely love. So we thought about, well, actually, what kind of leadership, what kind of vision did we need for Te Tauihu? And at the time, there was a fund, and I'm not too sure how many of you have heard about the Provincial Growth Fund. Yes, quite a few of you. And we thought that we would pitch up with the support of our iwi, local councils, some of the large employers, our Chamber of Commerces across the region, to actually start to think about what might a collective vision be for the region. What might a intergenerational wellbeing framework look like? And I know that wellbeing is one of those terms, I guess, that has been bandied around. But we start to think about the intergenerational outcomes. We start to think, actually, would it be pretty cool if every child in Te Tauihu has the opportunity to learn the history about this place? We think about identity, and we think about how we connect and love this place. We think about offering safe spaces. We think about, actually, what does a new regenerative agriculture community look like for us? The well-being of our soils, our water. There's a lot of conversations around zero waste, but actually we have pockets in this region that are trying to do lots of little things, but actually how do we connect better to make this place that we actually honour. So part of our process is to develop an intergenerational vision. It's a wellbeing framework, and then thinking about the priority projects that we as communities think that we need to drive forward in terms of actioning those outcomes. So today we had quite an interesting and lively session around our relationship to the natural world, around this regenerative and distributive economy. And tomorrow we'll have some more discussions around the infrastructure. I think often about motueka that needs to be replumbed, but where does the investment come for that? And then we also think about the health and the well-being of our families and how might we do better there. And then potentially the longer conversation is actually then what does leadership look like? That looks like partnership. It looks like that we want to be able to have people be able to participate, and then also the mechanism around protection. So it's a big project. It's ambitious because we have to complete the strategy by September this year. So I think for us it was about how do we engage with you as the community, and we thought, there's a lot of, again, conversations around climate change, and when my son said to me, what are you doing about climate change? It's scary, Mum, and I think it is. And then it makes you think, actually, what can we all do towards that? So there was a lot of discussion around our carbon footprint and, again, our relationship to water, etc. So we're going to put all these ideas together. We want to be able to come out and share these. Tonight, it's not a climate change conversation. Well, it could be, but we started to think about, actually, let's think about resilience. Let's think about having some ambition and courage, and think about our healthy communities. So I don't really want to say too much more than that, but we're really thankful that you came out on this cold night. We're really looking forward to our panel speakers, and also how might we engage better with you to be able to be part of this journey in terms of creating the intergenerational strategy for Te Tauihu. So without further ado, I will hand over to our team. They will come up here, and thank you again for coming out tonight. Kia ora.
E aka nui, I aka akurahi, tēnā koutou katoa. E tū ana au I raro I te maru o maunga tapu, tū mai. Ngā awa, e rere. Ka mihi ake ki a koutou, I runga e te āhuatanga o tēnei wā. No te tai tokirau tēnei, engari e tupu ake au I motueka. Nō reira, me mihi ki te hunga kāinga, ngā iwi takitake o te Tauihu, tēnā koutou. Kei ngā pai kōrero mō tēnei rangi, kei te mihi atu. Nā koutou mātou whakahōnore, koutou anō hoki, ngā koro mātua, ngā rangatira, me ngā kaka wahanui o te hāpori, tēnā koutou. Kāti, kua whakarauika tātou e runga I te karanga o te Tauihu. Te karanga whenua, te karanga moana, te karanga tangata. Nō reira, ka whakapau kaha ana au ki te kaupapa o te Tauihu. Kōrero kei runga, raru kei raro. Mā tātou katoa te huarahi tika e whai ana. Mā whero, mā pango, ka oti ai te mahi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Thank you everyone for coming along this evening, and we're very excited to launch this Te Tauihu Talk series. My name is Johnny O'Donnell, for those of you who I don't know, and it's an absolute privilege to be facilitating the conversation this evening. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. As most of you will be aware, there is a live stream running for those who couldn't make the event tonight. Now would be a really good time. It's live on Facebook, so the Facebook page is Te Tauihu Intergenerational Strategy. And we also have our website, tetauihu.nz. And so we have Vimeo, YouTube, and a Facebook live stream. And if you'd like to share this kaupapa with others in your networks and friends and whānau, then now would be a really good time to share that. The other reason you may want to have the live stream on and your media volume down is because on those live streams there is the opportunity to ask questions. And so the first part of this evening is going to be a facilitated conversation with our guest panellists tonight, who I'll introduce you to shortly. and then we'll have a quick break to recharge the glasses and go to the toilet, and then when we reconvene, the whole second half of this evening will be audience questions. So the way we're facilitating that in the interest of time is that you can submit your questions whether you're here or whether you're anywhere else in Te Tauihu or across the world. You can leave those questions on Facebook or via our website, and we will go through them and get as many on the bill for the second half of this evening as you like. So if something sparks for you in the first part of this conversation, or is a question you really want to ask one of our panellists or all of our panellists, then the place to do it is on your phones, and we'll get to those after the break. Kei te pai? So the other thing around that is that we have a live stream running. We've got a fantastic team here who have been putting all that together. It's been a big effort putting this series together, and we've had a fantastic team on it. So there are going to be crowd shots, and we're obviously live streaming. We're also producing videos off the back of this to really document the journey of developing this strategy across Te Tauihu. If you're a bit camera shy and would rather not be on film, now would probably be a good time to leave, or otherwise make yourself known to us so we can try and at least avoid your shots. That goes for in the foyer as well while we're collecting ideas and documenting conversations. You will have noticed as you come in, there are some canvases on the wall as well. There are 3 questions being asked there, and there are some stickers where you can note up your ideas. So they are asking, what are the things you love about Te Tauihu, discovering what binds us together? What are the things you'd like to change? And then lastly, what are your big ideas for Te Tauihu? So if you'd like to, in the breaks and after the panel session, then you're more than welcome to go and jot those ideas down. They're not a pointless brainstorm. Whatever comes out of tonight, we'll gather up, and it will form part of, those ideas will feed into and form part of the strategy. We're also in the next week launching digital versions of those as well. So if you go away and digest some of the kōrero and want to add your thoughts later, then there'll be more and more opportunities to do so. But let's dive into it because we're running a little bit behind. So I'm going to introduce you to our 3 panellists for this evening, and then we're going to start the conversation. So the first person I'd like to introduce you to is Andy Elliot. Andy is the Research and Business Development Manager for Wakatū. He has recently been through the Nuffield Scholarship on the research topic Exporting Aotearoa, a new business model for companies focused on nutrition, which was a really fantastic and well-circulated piece of work for those of you who had the privilege of reading it. But prior to being with Wakatū, Andy was working for the Cawthron Institute, developing aquaculture and power hatcheries in Rakiura, Stewart Island, where he also lived. He studied at Otago University, where he gained a postgraduate diploma in marine science, and he is currently on the exec for the New Zealand hemp industry. And we're absolutely privileged to have you here with us tonight. Nau mai, haere mai, Andy. Next up, it's my pleasure to welcome Richard Brudvick-Linder along this evening. Richard is a teacher at Nelson College, specialising in gifted and talented students, and although he is clearly passionate about education, as some of you will have heard recently at the Aspire conference, his background is actually very diverse. Richard has been the Chief of Staff for the world's largest communications and public engagement consultancy before moving to none other than Mohua Golden Bay, which might be a question we have to ask shortly. Since being here in Nelson, he's established Whakatū Intellectual Capital Kohanga and is advocating passionately to make Nelson the intellectual engine room of the country. So nau mai, haere mai, Richard.
John.
And last but certainly not least, my good friend, Aneika Young. Aneika was born and bred in Motueka, and she noted in here that it's the centre of the universe, which I couldn't agree more with. Aneika has an intimate connection with her whenua, Te Tauihu Te Waka o Maui, through her local iwi affiliations, Ngāti Rarua and Te Atiawa. Her background has been in both Māori resource management and environmental ecological disciplines. Aneika has spent 10 seasons in outdoor pursuits as a guide in the Abel Tasman, Kahurangi and Nelson Lakes National Parks. She spent 7 years studying at Victoria and graduated with a Master's in Science and Environmental Studies, specialising in Māori resource management. She is currently the Māori Cultural Advisor and Environmental Scientist at Cawthron Institute. She is a trustee on the Te Awhina Marae Board, a trustee on the Abel Tasman Birdsong Trust, an alternate director for Te Akina Te Taiao, and she is a board member for the ministerial appointed Nelson Marlborough Conservation Board. Nau mai, haere mai, Aneika.
Okay.
Right, now that I've introduced our fantastic panel, it's my opportunity to sit down and start a conversation with them all. So, The format for the first part of the evening is we're going to be having more or less one-on-one conversations, and so you can get to know the panellists and their work and their views on Te Tauihu. The purpose of this is to spark your thinking and your ideas, head into a break, recharge your glasses, and then for you to help shape the conversation for the second part of this evening. So we're going to start with you, Andy, and we're going to start with the theme of the evening, which is, what does the word resilience mean to you?
To me, resilience means the ability to adapt, to survive in the face of uncertainty. So, yeah.
So what would it look like for you if Te Tauihu was a resilient place?
So I guess in terms of my topic, which is called around food and nutrition, it would be about visualising the worst case scenario. So it would be about creating a holistic approach to what it is that we produce, what we've got, and how we might deal with what uncertainty we have moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and one of the things that I know Mariana spoke to earlier is that we were very aware entering this conversation that right now a lot of issues are being thrown at people. There's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety about the future. Tell us about the flip side. What potential do you see for Te Tauihu as a region?
Well, I think there's, as you say, that brings up opportunity. I think when we're faced with uncertainty, then we can approach it a number of ways. But one way we can approach it is by looking at how we develop mechanisms or strategies to better adapt and to look forward to what those opportunities might be for growth. What it teaches us, I guess, is that we can't continue to keep doing what it is that we're doing. So we have to look forward to how we might create more economic value, how we might create better environmental outcomes. So how we might create stronger communities.
So how do you think in the current context in your area of interest and specialty around food production, how do you think we currently stack up in Te Tauihu in terms of capitalising on that opportunity?
I think, touching on what Mariana said before, I think there is a lot of good examples. I think there's a lot more potential, and I think one of the things that I think can come out of endeavours and things like this is to actually rally around those people, create more aspirational goals around what it is that we want to be in the medium to long term, and how we can all work towards that.
So we've got a lot of, I'm aware we've got a lot of business owners in the audience, and collectively this project is bringing together people with quite large spheres of influence. So what would your advice be to businesses who are wanting to meet the goals of both adding value to their product and capitalising on the economic opportunity, whilst also making the environmental shifts we need as well?
My advice to them would be that probably one of the greatest opportunities that I think New Zealand and ultimately this region has is to look at what it is we produce in terms of nutrition and health. At the moment, we're very invested in food, be it for fashion, be it for for things that aren't traditionally or aren't actually focused on health. I think if we start to think about health and nutrition within the systems that we produce our food from, then all of a sudden we look at how it's produced, we look at where our waste is, and there's a lot of opportunity in that type of thinking, and it just means that what we're actually doing is creating an environment where we've got a bigger toolbox to approach the future with.
In your fantastic report that you put together as part of the Northfield Scholarship, you talk about those goals of reducing waste and adding value in the nutrition sphere, and refer to the circular economy. What do you mean by that?
So for me, it's we produce food across the world. There's a third to 40% of all of that food is wasted or lost. So what that tells me is that we're either doing things inefficiently, or we're not focusing on what that actually has as a value. So I think we need to be a lot more focused on how producing something fits into a bigger system. And for me, a circular economy is something that solves problems, something that creates solutions, but also can create value for the whole part. So if you're talking about something that we produce, then there would be no waste. There would be a really high value output for that, and a nutraceutical or something that that allows that system to be funded. But we're also solving environmental problems as well. So it's social, it's people, it's the whole lot.
So it makes a lot of sense as a concept, and I can hear people agreeing as well. We're a lot. It would be fair to say we're a long way from that in our current climate. So how do you see the transition between the way business is done now in this industry and the vision that you are passionate about? How do we go about that? Where do we start?
I think we have to do what we don't do very well now, and that's collaborate. I think we have to focus on having more aspirational goals. So stop thinking about the sort of the terms that we think about now in 3 to 5 years, and think 10 to 15 years. Even though it's stretchy, it's like that's something to aspire towards, and we do need to work together towards that. And I think we don't have enough of that in our food systems and in our economy. So, and that's going to provide. I mean, it's going to require like strong leadership, and it's going to require a different way of thinking to how we've got here.
And there are a number of consumer shifts taking place all around the world at the moment, and I know you travel a lot with your work. What do you also talk a lot about, consumer-led innovation in your report?
Yes.
What's your perception from travelling of the way people see Aotearoa firstly, and then Te Tauihu?
Aotearoa, I guess it's what we'd expect. We're known for certain things. We're known for our isolation, our natural capital, all those things that people first think about. I think we've got a really good platform in that respect. For this region, I think maybe probably the most common reaction was maybe Marlborough Sauvignon. That was probably what people thought of first. And to me, like, I guess to go to that space, it's like, well, how do we create something that does define us and that does inspire people to think of the top of the South and what we could be. So I've answered the second part of your question, but yeah.
So then looking forward and thinking about your future work, once this strategy is underway, once there is an intergenerational vision for Te Tauihu that's been designed collaboratively, what are the sorts of things you'd like people to be saying about Te Tauihu in the future when you travel? Well,
I think that if we can create something for people to work towards, then I guess like what I see is a untapped potential for New Zealand. For this region as a food producer, we've got an amazing primary production system. We're world leaders in brand and provenance and storytelling and in our products, the quality of our products. But I think there's another whole layer there that we can have, and that is nutrition. I think this region could be known for the health and nutrition centre of New Zealand. I think if we did that and we created something that we could aim towards in the next 10 to 15 years, then we'd be a magnet for all the top scientists, all the top food nutritionists, all the people that are involved in ingredients and science and the funding. I think ultimately if we had that focus, then we'd also be acutely aware of how we produce our food, because people buying food for nutrition and health want to know how we produce it. And so therefore we'd have to change some of the systems that we've got now. So it's kind of like a circle with a drive point, which is the value creation.
And you've talked about the need for collaboration. You've got a vision and a big idea for Te Tauihu that I know is shared by many. And so what environment do we need to create? What you talk about leadership, you talk about the systems we have, what platform do we need to get there? What do you think it's actually going to take?
I think all the components are there. Like we have we have businesses, we have processing, we have manufacturing that are already world leaders. So what we need to do is just make sure that they're at full capacity. We need to make sure that our science community is all focused and targeted on helping us achieve those outcomes. And I think what will eventually happen is that if we do that well, then international ingredients companies, they'll want to be here because of our potential. And I think that ultimately is what we want. We want that investment to come in, but we want it to come in on our terms.
Nice, great place to leave it. We want the investment to come in, but we want it on our terms, a sentiment that I'm sure is shared by many. So I'm going to move on to Richard now. So Richard, I have to ask, how did you end up going from the chief of staff of a large global company to living in Mohua?
Well, it was a very stressful job, and prior to that I had worked for big technology companies, and that was also a very stressful job. And part of my job was doing lobbying on behalf of the video game industry, something I'm not particularly proud of today, but it was an attempt to have a more balanced life, but also teaching, being part of it, an attempt to, I say my Catholic guilt sticks with me, and my penance is to be locked in a room with teenage boys who play video games. So it was just a combination of quality of life issues, really, and trying to give something back. Yeah.
And so why Golden Bay and why Te Tauihu?
Golden Bay, gosh, how need you explain why someone would want to live there?
I'll go on.
It's just spectacular. I remember the first time we drove out, our house was in Pekawa, and the first time that we drove out that way, I thought I was at the end of the earth. It was just incredible. And having had these very stressful jobs, thinking that you could be in some place that has the serenity of being at the remote end of the earth was very alluring. Both of my kids they're adopted, they're Chinese, and so having a place where they could be accepted for who they are. Golden Bay is a very accepting community, and so a combination of things.
Awesome. And how long have you been in the region now?
Yeah, so back and forth for about 20 years and living here full-time for 10 years. Yeah.
So at what point in that journey did you see the potential for this region to be the kind of intellectual engine room of the country? Where did that idea come from?
Yeah, the first thing that struck me was when you spend time in Golden Bay and you live in Golden Bay, you start to get to know the people of Golden Bay. I've heard people say before, I don't know if this is verifiable, that it has one of the highest incidences of PhD per capita in the nation. And I would believe that that's possible because, you have an incredible, astute, erudite, intellectual and interesting and diverse population there. And so that was one of the things that made me start to think, what's going on here? And then when we moved over to this side of the hill, to Nelson, again, same experience, right? The incredibly cosmopolitan, interesting, oftentimes intellectual community that we have here. People who make a living, many of them, by having good ideas. Because when you're in a remote location, having good ideas is an important way of making a living in a place like that. So it was just those things. And I guess I'll just add one more piece to it. I'd worked in Silicon Valley and Seattle. Those are the two main places I worked in technology. And both of those places, despite Seattle's reputation for gray days, they're both spectacularly beautiful in their own way. And there was that high quality of life component to them that I recognize feeds an intellectual capital community, because people who make a living with their minds can often live anywhere in the age that we live in today, right? And so again, I saw that same thing here and thought we could do it.
So for the benefit of those in the audience and on the live stream who didn't get to hear you at Aspire recently and haven't crossed your work yet, explain the concept. What would it mean for Nelson and for Te Tauihu to be the intellectual capital of New Zealand?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I think it involves fundamentally reassessing who we are and reaffirming who we have been, because this has long been a place of innovation, right? I mean, you can go back to the fact that the Suter itself is one of the first 3 public galleries in the nation. We have the oldest public secondary school in the nation. The School of Music was one of the original schools of music in New Zealand. Of course, Lord Rutherford, and discovering the power of atomic energy, regardless of what you think about that, was an incredible, innovative discovery. And then we can bring it into modern day, things like the world of wearable art. We have this heritage of innovation here. But we don't see that as who we are. We think of ourselves as this place built on primary industries and built on many other kinds of things, but we don't really think of ourselves as a place of intellect and innovation. And I guess my assertion is that we always have been that, and we still are that, and we just need to make that more clearly a part of our future that drives us forward, because it actually can be an economic engine for us. And so there's more to say on that, but yeah, it's about recognizing who we have been, recognizing our superpower, right, and embracing our hidden superpower and using it to drive us forward in many ways. It's it's a thing about viability, equity, sustainability. It allows those things all to flourish and to develop more fully.
So it's a very aspirational vision for the region and a very positive one. But of course, it's not without acknowledgement of some of the issues we face.
Yeah.
What do you think are the biggest issues that are getting in the way at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, so this is it, right? Is that when we have an incredible strength like this, one compelling reason to embrace it is because it helps us to address a lot of the fundamental problems we have. So we have the second lowest productivity in the nation. Right, the second lowest productivity in the nation. So we have, a 15%. Our wages are 15% below the national averages and declining. Right, we have more people over 65 than under 15. We have, 8.5% of the population, of the workforce population, has disappeared and continuing to disappear here. And then we have, lots of other kinds of issues about capital flow issues. We have issues about using real estate as our primary investment vehicles, and that deprives other types of innovation funding streams. There are multiple issues, but they all kind of come back to the fact that they sell our region short, and they deprive us of our ability to move forward in a way that makes it good for our younger generation, an issue that I pay a lot of attention to, because many of my students have said to me, they call me Mr. Brudvick. Mr. Brudvick, I'd love to stay in Nelson, but I don't know how I could stay in Nelson. And they don't mean like stay in Nelson, permanently, but what they mean is after high school, maybe going off to university or having an OE, they'd like to be able to come back here and think that they have a future here. Maybe as a 26-year-old or a 28-year-old. But often, they think, oh, the only way I can come back is I'll be 35 and I'll have 2 kids in tow, and that's the only way I can really come back to this place. So it's really, I'm very heartened by the intergenerational strategy notion of Te Tauihu, this whole conference, because it's about giving our young people more power and a more viable future as well.
Mm. And just a reminder to everyone, if there's anything in this conversation that's resonating with you or that you'd like to know more information about, then please make sure you're on the live stream asking those questions, and in the second half we'll be able to ask our panellists some of your questions as well. Richard, you've outlined a number of areas where you see potential for innovation hubs to be developed in the region.
Yeah.
What's the one that excites you the most that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, it's funny because we basically have 10 concentrated economies already existing here, and they're all predicated in one way or another on innovation and intellectual capital. And they range from the aviation industry, which we often forget about being a significant driver of our economy, to things like medical health and well-being. You know, I mean, we have a lot of world-class doctors here and tremendous potential, nutraceutical companies, a whole range of things. So and there are more of these. I could go on, I could name all 10, but I won't. But the point is that really, fundamentally, it's not about being excited about one of them, but it's about being excited about their unifying characteristic is that they're all driven by intellect, ideas, innovation, and that's what we should be building our economy around.
So one final question, because I'm interested, again, the same question I asked Andy. This is a really aspirational vision. There'll be very few people in the audience and on the live stream who would disagree with that. What's holding it back, and what environment do we need to create to allow for it?
Well, there are a lot of constraints. Everything from having councils across Tauihu who aren't fundamentally unified, right? And fairness to them, they're hugely hamstrung too. I mean, if you're TDC, you have a vast amount of terrain that you have to provide infrastructure to, and that takes a lot of money. And every time you're spending money on, either maintaining your infrastructure or rebuilding it or whatever you're doing, building it out a little bit further, you're not really investing in the economic engine of the region. So that's a huge issue for them and for all of us. And the way municipal government, local government is structured in New Zealand, we don't give them many options for being able to fund themselves. I mean, we don't say to them, for example, you could have a percentage of the GST that's generated in your region to appropriate towards investment to build the economic engine of your region, right? And these are some fundamental structural issues. So I'm a political science person by training, and so I see those kinds of things. But then I think there are also part of it is just we don't have this recognition for who we are. We talk about hospitality and tourism and primary industries, which are absolutely important. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying they too are, because Andy just talked about this, turning food into nutrition, right? Really focusing on that. These are innovation industries too. They can have a bigger component that are about intellectual capital than we currently conceive of them. So it's really about focusing on these industries and trying to make them more connected in a coherent way. And right now we don't see that coherency. We don't have that image of ourselves. We don't put it out there. I mean, the other thing about my jobs in the past is, for example, head of the PR for Microsoft Consumer Division. And so I'm really conscious of being able to tell a story about yourself and the power of being able to tell the story about yourself, controlling the language of it. And, we don't tell a good story about ourselves that really elevates us. We tell a story that, is quite nice, but it doesn't really elevate us to the next step.
Thanks, Richard. And everything you're saying is reminding me of the moment that you had with myself, Anna, and Paul at Aspire the other week, where you heard Paul spoke, and you came up to us in the break and said, "Oh, there are so many synergies. We have to talk," and they're so closely aligned with the strategy that I have to declare and promise that I didn't even write his script tonight, but very much in line with the thinking around the Tauihu intergenerational strategy. So, moving on to Aneika. Aneika, I've got a deep question for you, which is, are we being good ancestors?
It's quite deep, Johnny. Yeah. Very deep. I think, no, frankly. I mean, when we think about our ancestors in the Te Ao Māori sense, they've definitely laid the pathway and the legacy for us in terms of how to behave. And currently we're living within a system that does not meet or align with those types of values, and that's really things around our obligation to be responsible kaitiaki and ensuring that our whenua, that our waterways, all those types of things are kept in a state that's fit for purpose for our children's children.
So there are a lot of issues that are affecting that question. It's a question that's being asked as the theme of this strategy, is asking, checking in with ourselves and seeing if we're being good ancestors and how we can be better ancestors. And that's really the navigating force of this whole piece of work. So what are the issues or the challenges or the things that we're doing at the moment that keep you up at night, I guess, that stress you out the most, that you'd like to see changed?
I guess you're talking to environmentalists, so without being too, I guess, pessimistic about things, you know, the world currently is going through a bit of a change. We're starting to see a lot of our waterways, our land, those types of things become degraded. And so when you see those things happening within your lifetime, you know, I'm not that old. I'm in the 30s, you know, that's quite scary stuff. So I guess what keeps me up at night, apart from people, you know, boy problems or people that you're dealing with at work or whatever, relationships, you know, it is thinking about, you know, how do we make change? One of the biggest issues that we have as iwi in this region is really about sitting at the decision-making table, and that's very difficult to do that at times. We do have great relationships with some of our government partners and Crown partners, but that's just something that, you know, it's going to take a long time. But I think about that a lot and how we can actually make change.
So you talk about you know, iwi being at the decision-making table, and so what do you think in terms of looking at it from a Te Ao Māori context, looking at the values, the leadership models within Te Ao Māori, what's sort of one concept or idea you could share with the audience that you think would bring the most value in terms of wider society from Te Ao Māori? What's one thing you'd like us to embrace more?
I guess there's quite a few. We have the tangas, if you know what that means. It's, you know, things like manaakitanga, kaitiakitanga, kotahitanga, all the tangas. But one concept that I actually quite like, and I think is the foundation to how we behave and what we believe in, is whakapapa. And I think, you know, we do believe that we're connected to everything. We're connected to the, you know, to the rocks, to the trees, the birds, the bees. And having that philosophy sort of front of mind, I think it will help people to see the true value of our environment. We'll become more connected. If you get that, you know, that the moana is actually our brother, you know, or the river as our ancestor or our tupuna. So when you start to think in that way, you start to do things differently. And I think understanding the concept of whakapapa, you know, we've got a lot of cousins, Kazi bros, you know, all that type of thing, the wider family, then I think we're in a better position to start thinking long term. Yeah,
that's awesome. So, and I think, you know, resonates with a lot of people as well. What do you think structurally might need to change, specifically in Te Tauihu? What are the shifts that you'd like to see take place, so that we can shake that feeling of the fact that we're not leaving a great legacy for future generations?
Well, I think what we're doing right now is one example of doing things from the bottom up, you know, having more community-based conversations. We have a lot of limitation when it comes to regulation policy, some of those bureaucracy of funding. You know, how do we start to do things outside of the status quo or business as usual? And I think, you know, stepping out of those types of organisations and starting to do things just because it feels right is what we need to start doing, and being a bit more courageous about that, because you kind of know what's going on. You know, you sort of you get in your car, you drive to work, you might pull into McDonald's if you're that way inclined. But all of these things have a cost, and you know, what is it that we need to do to ensure that we are being responsible every day? Yeah.
So you get exposed to, you're on the conservation board, you're on the Birdsong Trust, you work with Cawthron, and you're involved with iwi. What are some of the positive changes that you're seeing happen? What's exciting you the most at the moment?
I think for me it's really about the relationships. Like I'm starting to see a lot of our people working better together. You know, an example of that is over in the Waido, you know, with the Department of Conservation and the local iwi, starting to work, you know, around how do we better manage, you know, the Waido bar, for example. But that that's those conversations have never happened before, you know, and it sort of strikes me that doesn't happen on a regular basis. So it is touching on that point you made, Andy, around, you know, how do we work collaboratively better together? And what are some of the other things? I think action that's happening on the ground. You know, a good friend of mine, Stu, I think he's in the audience there. He's got the Tasman Bay Guardians, and that's actually doing things, you know, actually getting out there and walking the talk. We're really good at pushing paper and, you know, sitting in our office, but when it comes to the crunch time, you know, what are we doing actually on the ground to ensure that we're making change? So there's lots of really awesome community initiatives that are happening, I think, in our region, and it would be better if they were coordinated a little bit more, and how do those communities work with the regulators, with our industries, with our scientists. So there's a lot of, you know, opportunity to start doing that, I think, yeah.
So you'd no doubt agree that there's a big transition and gap between the way we do things now, the way business operates. You referred to a lot of the ways we all live, and then we want to be better ancestors. We want to look after the land. How do we make that transition? There's collaboration, there's work on the ground, but the hard reality of the fact that some things need to change and that they will hurt. How do we approach that?
4-day weeks, my opinion. 3-day weekends. We need to start doing things that make us feel good, you know, like, and that's kind of getting a bit deep. But actually, we spend a lot of time in these silos in our little offices, doing what we think is, you know, contributing to this bigger perspective. But I think, you know, the creativity and the innovation comes when you're out in the bush, or when you're, you know, on the boat going fishing or hanging with your friends and talking, you know. So I think we need to do more of that, is rather than having this 9 to 5, you know, kind of approach, how do we better improve our, you know, mental health? And, you know, you actually like going to work, for example, and thinking more creatively about moving forward. But, yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways of doing that, but, yeah, 4-day week.
Nice. I want to ask you specifically as well around the potential you see for science and technology in the region. You've been exposed to a lot of the work going on. You work in that field, and what role do you see science and technology playing in tackling some of those future issues? And I guess more broadly, can we rely on it to solve some of these future crises?
It's an interesting question, Johnny. Well, I think because we do have a lot of really good things happening in our region, you know, like Cawthron, we have a lot of international renowned scientists, PhD kind of folk, and you know, they come from all over the world to work in our region. And really, how do we tap into that? You know, like these guys are working not only in our region but across New Zealand. So there's really good infrastructure in that respect with what we have currently for plant and food research. You know, there's other government departments that are doing a lot of research. But I guess, and maybe it's around the conversation with industry and thinking, you know, where the investments for those types of technologies come from, because, yeah, I think it is, you know, these things are all connected. You know, how do we get the intellects to work together? Where does the money come from? It's all about the money. And then, you know, how do we coordinate across the board? So, yeah, there's lots of potential. There's a few new facilities that are popping up, and, you know, those types of projects and initiatives are really how you look at moving forward in terms of technology.
So people could be forgiven for hearing this conversation and thinking about ideas like high-value nutrition, selling our products to the world, developing the intellectual capital of New Zealand, having the knowledge economy, and all these big ideas. What do these conversations mean for people on the ground? What do they mean for people struggling to live in Te Tauihu right now, who are thinking about survival day to day? How can we take what's happening up here and the work you're seeing, and how do you see that making a difference down here?
That's kind of an interesting question, because I think people who are on the ground have more connection, and I think that people that are kind of a bit more disconnected from it don't. So, you know, one of the things that I like and what I encourage is that people become more connected to their environment and to the whenua. So, you know, we have a lot of whānau who are, you know, might be living on quite a minimum wage, but they have this connection to their place. So just to twist your question around there a little bit. But I think, you know, there is this saying, and environmentalists love to use it a lot, is to kind of think globally but act locally. So, you know, looking at all that, what is going on internationally is important, but how do you bring it back? And so, you know, our young people, maybe they go abroad, but then, you know, how do we bring them back home to then apply that type of knowledge in a local setting? Yeah.
And I know you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but what do you see as the transition that we would need here in terms of the technology and science and things like artificial intelligence as they create or make a lot of jobs redundant? What do you think it's important to keep in mind as we go through the transition to potentially high school jobs for our whānau? What do we need to do to make that transition smoother?
Well, yeah, like I guess it comes back to that, you know, the place and connection to place.
Identity.
So, yeah, identity and wānanga, things like that. You know, getting kids out into the ngāhere, into the bush. So, you know, technology is going to accelerate and evolve quite quickly, and there's no doubt that young people are, you know, they're going to be all over that. That's the way it is. But then, you know, how do we also maintain that connection with place? And that's definitely a priority in my mind in terms of the value that you get out of, you know, working and living quite closely with the environment. So, I mean, we're starting to see it now. You know, people are becoming less engaged with those types of spaces. So, yeah, that would be my thing.
And just finally, before we wrap up, you talk about, you know, some of leadership potentially having a disconnect to what's happening on the ground. So if you've got a captive audience of people in spheres of influence, this project is touching major organisations across Te Tauihu. So what's the message that you've got for the leadership here in terms of the way they need to behave?
It's a tricky one. Well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to say anything too mean, but
Go on, we're finishing up.
well, I guess it's how do you engage young ones to be part of that conversation around leadership, and looking at yourself, you know, and making yourself accountable, because I know for a fact that there are leaders out there that are not really in there for the right reasons. So sort of checking yourself, you know, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Who am I representing? And you know, how can I do things differently? Because I think we do need to do things differently. Things aren't working currently, and I'm talking about local politics in particular. And it's tricky, you know, you have to work within the parameters of that system and the budgets and so on. But I think, you know, there's this whole concept about the politics of love. And I don't know if you guys read that book, The New Zealand Project, by Max Harris. But he talks about, you know, sort of values-based leadership and introducing concepts like, you know, kindness, aroha, love, and that should be the thing front of mind in terms of how you lead and how you do things, is thinking, wow, am I actually being responsible? Am I thinking about those types of values when I'm making decisions? So, yeah, awesome. Read the book. It's a goodie.
Awesome. And a great challenge to finish this first segment on. So for those of you on the live stream, we're going to take about a 5 to 10 minute break to recharge our glasses, and you're welcome to do the same, of course. And if you've got questions, now is the chance, your last chance, to submit the questions that you'd like to shape the second part of this conversation. That includes everyone in the audience here. So please, let's make this break relatively quick because we've got quite a bit to get through. But take your glasses with you, grab another drink, go to the toilet, and we'll be back here in about 5 to 10 minutes. Hello? Hello? Good. Happy for me to...
Yeah, hang on, I need to check the rest of the levels. Is everyone else going, guys? We need to check everyone's going before we say yes. We can hold it, but we can't stop.
Do you want me to test them?
Just get them talking. Don't worry about Pro Tools. Fuck Pro Tools. Oh no, we need Pro Tools.
It's just what again. As soon as that
We might actually just need to put out an announcement, just say, hey guys, we need another 5 minutes.
Am I still on?
Guys, do we have a plan B? Can we just run another mic into the desk? Or do we have to have the mic?
Plan B is what we do is we take Johnny's mic out.
Yeah.
We put the handheld
Yeah, that's what I'm
microphone on
saying.
that channel and pass it around.
That's what
So the handheld's good.
Yeah, handheld's good.
Yep, testing. All good? Right, aroha mai everyone for the delay. There's a lot going into making sure we've got 3 concurrent live streams going. So we're switching to handheld, but I hope you've all recharged your glasses and are ready for the second part of the session. I'm going to have to wrestle the iPad back off our panellists who are reviewing the questions you've all been submitting. So for those of you who asked, and sorry if I wasn't clear enough, the live stream is running on the website, which is te tauihu.nz. You can click through from the home page, or you can go /live, and there's the ability to ask questions on that part. Or the easiest way for most of you will probably be on Facebook. The Facebook page is called Te Tauihu Intergenerational Strategy. So you're welcome to submit questions. We've had a number of questions, which is going to keep us pretty busy anyway. And in the interests of, I don't need to moderate any of these in terms of reshaping them. I've given the panellists a bit of a heads up about some of the questions. So these are the ones that have been coming through predominantly from Facebook. Some of you here have asked them, and others who couldn't make it tonight. So let's get straight into it. The first question is from Vicky Thorne. So how does the panel actually see the strategy of putting food on whānau tables and living in healthy homes and more than minimal wages?
Let's talk to that one. Okay, so I mean, I'm all about equality. You know, like if we're thinking about everyone having equal opportunity, that's in terms of access to education, health, housing, all of those types of things. I think there's definitely a bit of disparity between people across society. So minimum wage is a bit of a shocker, really, and there's no reason why our people shouldn't be having the same opportunity. And I mean, I think that's a policy type question. It needs to come from government in terms of thinking about ensuring that people have access to those types of necessities, and they shouldn't have to be living in poverty. We're a pretty wealthy country, really, and if you look at other socialist governments across the world, everyone has sort of those types of opportunities. It's not acceptable that we have homeless people who can't feed their children, families that are working, but they still can't afford to provide for their families. So that has to come from the top, in my opinion. Guys?
So this gets back to the idea of we have to kind of elevate the overall economy. And again, not to besmirch, sort of primary industries and hospitality jobs, but these are the kinds of industries that are very susceptible to sunshine wages. And so if we try to develop the fact that, maybe this already, but we have the highest per capita rate of science and research jobs in the nation, right? We have more science and research jobs per capita than any place in New Zealand. So if we try to build critical mass of this kind of thing, then it creates a sort of virtuous ecosystem, including things like then suddenly NMIT starts to change the kind of programs that they offer. And the kind of programs that they offer are then more aligned with these jobs that pay better. And as that happens, then of course the overall environment starts to change, and we start to think about creating more verticality in how we live in this community. You know, I mean, we really, if we want to have things like modal shift in transportation, we have to become a more vertical community. And the great thing about that is that's very compatible with an intellectual capital economy, because having labs and offices and those kinds of things lend themselves to a vertical footprint, whereas if we were going to build an economy on malls and sprawl and manufacturing and these kinds of things, then it's totally different. And so if we want to create a better economy and the ability to put food on the table, we have to change that economy. And the first place in changing the economy is changing how we think about the economy. So that's my thought.
So following on from that, Lisa Lawrence, and I know many people in the audience who I've spoken to this evening, want to ask along those same lines, with so much opportunity to provide economic value and lifelong prosperity for local families, what is the appetite from business? And in this scenario, what's your opinion, and are you supportive of the concept of a living wage?
Yes, it's as Aneika covered off, it kind of is a bottom line for regions, and to live here is expensive. It's unaffordable for many, and so I think it's a community's responsibility to deal with that in terms of how we're going to create more wealth and how we're going to create a more vibrant economy, a more diverse economy, because you know, that labour is going to become even more of a problem moving forward. So we have to think about whether there is actually an endpoint to some of those industries and some of those roles, and how we might create different scenarios out of that for value. You know, so I am in support.
The next question is from Kelly May. Great question. So how will young people present themselves to tell and show us, brackets, oldies in positions of influence, what works to inform the Te Tauihu intergenerational strategy? So I can add to this in the context of the strategy, and I'm happy to at the end, but generally speaking, how do we lift up rangatahi to be able to participate and more actively contribute to decision making and leadership in Te Tauihu?
Well, apparently I'm still a rangatahi until I'm 35. So that's criteria. So I guess there are ways in which to do that, and one I think is about ensuring that rangatahi are part of writing these types of strategies. I mean, that's happened before in some of the work that Wakatu have done, that we get those young people to come in and actually write it, because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with it at the end of the day. You know, they're the ones who are going to be dealing with those types of issues. So, and they will be thinking differently. So having workshops, wānanga, and bringing them into the conversation is pretty crucial, I think. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree.
So, one of the things when you have a population where more people are over 65 than under 15 is that young people start to become invisible in the community. And so one of the things is we actually have to see young people. I mean, yes, we need to engage with them, but we need to see them first. And one way to show that we don't really see them today is the disappearance of the teen hubs that used to exist in Nelson. We have a youth council who is active and full of passionate people, and they have some profile in our community. But again, if we want to really acknowledge their concerns more, they have to be a little bit more front and center. So I think it's a complex question. There are lots of tentacles to it, but it comes down to, first of all, a lot of these things are just seeing reality and then acting on reality.
Kia ora, and just to add very briefly, because I do want to get through everyone's questions, in the context of the strategy, there is a number of youth engagements underway, and we're very open to more input. I'm also still considered a rangatahi, and one of the things that I'm very passionate about is making sure that we don't always try and create segregated spaces for young people to contribute to decision making. I think we fall into this habit of putting young people over there, asking their opinion. Most of the time they answer based on the things that they think we want to hear, rather than what they're actually thinking, and as a result we get to tick the box and say that we have youth engagement, but it doesn't actually carry any weight in terms of decision making. So wherever possible, and big mihi to the young people who have come out tonight to this event and who are tuning in as well, wherever possible we want young people to join, to reach out and make these forums more accessible to young people so they can be a part of everyone's conversation, not just separated over here as well. So that's some of the work that's underway at our end. This one is for you, Aneika, and it's from Nick Moke, and the question is, do you think institutional racism impacts building relationships between people and the land?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of barriers when it comes to our whānau or people connecting back to the whenua. And obviously we are institutionalised to a certain degree in terms of our education we receive, the types of groups we associate with and work with. So there's different ways of learning and connecting, and I think if we revert back to some of our traditional methods of learning, if we're place-based kind of learning, those types of things, then we can sort of remove a lot of those types of barriers and be more connected. But institutional racism, that's a biggie. That's, in terms of building relationships with each other, that's it's been sort of part of our history as a country, really, is that issue is underlying and it hasn't necessarily been dealt with in a lot of situations. But I think we are starting to come to terms with that, and I mean, it's still happening, every day, and some people will experience, some people won't experience it. But if we can kind of, think about, who, like, everyone sort of turns up to work, right, or turns up to wherever they're turning up to, and if we think about, okay, who what are our backgrounds, what are our values, what are our beliefs, those types of things, remove the kind of association or the whatever it is that the group of people or whatever we connect to, then, and just see each other for who we are, then, that's starting to think a bit differently about racism, but I don't really want to open that can of worms. It's kind of a weird question because I don't see that it's necessarily a problem for us to connect back because, I do connect back regularly, and I don't think that stops me necessarily, but it might for others. So hopefully that answers your question, Nick.
This one's from Rachel Boyack, who I think is here with us tonight. Yeah. So, with an ageing population and a large proportion of our community working in the aged care and service industries, how do we make the switch to being more productive and innovative?
I think we have to create more opportunities. There has to be a lot more thought go into what it is that's going to change that fundamentally in a 10-year plus time frame, rather than just thinking about kind of applying day-to-day solutions or year-to-year solutions to it. I mean, we know that those are the demographics of our region. We know that there's going to be a gap there. So we have to create opportunities to draw people in, and then create that economy that's going to allow that to happen. Because they're a part of, that's a part of our community, that's a part of how Nelson's got here, how this region's got here. So I think it really just forces us to look further into how we create industries that are sustainable, industries that create those high value jobs where people are allowing that to happen in the environment and in the economy that we've got. So, you want to?
We're going to track along if it's all right. So just one panellist per question from now on. I've got quite a few to get through still. So the next one is from Caleb Hill. And he said, do you feel as a community we have become risk adverse? We have a strong lack of leadership. Nobody wants to rock the boat or take the fall if something doesn't work out. If so, how do we overcome this and take on large-scale projects for the future of Nelson? Who's going to have the pleasure?
It's not just people; it's businesses as well. I think we've got business models that don't allow us to necessarily be that adaptive or reactive. I think the risk adverse is a fear of what it is that's around the corner, and we can't really react to that unless we embrace the fact that it's going to be different, and it's changing, and with change and with growth comes some failure, and I think that as a culture and as a region, and in New Zealand especially, is that we're adverse to that, and that is one of the major limitations we've got to being more reactive, to creating more opportunity. And I think we'll see that we see that in our governance boards, we see it in councils, we see it right across the board. So I think the diversity thing is part of it. I think we need to be a lot more in touch with what is actually driving some of this change around the world, and because it does affect us. So there's lots of different solutions for it, but I think it's right across.
Thanks, Andy. The next question is from Jenna Stellard, and she said, I love that we're looking to develop what we have, but why are we still touting tourism as a key industry when tourism is not going to be a sustainable industry given the cost of aviation fuel to the environment? The same with our aviation industry. As a young person, I wonder if we're really preparing for a radically different future, or we're just talking about it. I'm going to nominate Aneika Young for this question.
Thanks, Johnny. Well, I mean, she is sort of asking the question around the carbon footprint, right? And I guess we have a lot of international visitors that are coming into our region, and that's definitely grown exponentially over the last few years. So I do acknowledge the issue around more people coming to our country. I think we can maybe have regulations around that to answer the question around, reducing our carbon footprint. So, selling a quality product over, bringing in, the numbers, I think is the way that you can deal with it in terms of the tourism. So, we do have a great industry here in this region, and I don't think we should give that up. At this stage, I think we've got a special story to tell. A lot of our whānau do. We have our iwi stories around what's special and unique about our piece of the world, and we should be sharing that. But how do we do it in a way that is not going to compromise the integrity of our environment? And so that's what it always comes back down to. So selling a product that is maybe, a high cost, at a high cost, minimum amount of people. So there are smarter ways and more innovative ways of dealing with that issue. Yeah.
Awesome. And the next question is from Alex Munro. Alex wants us to get a bit more grounded here. So what are the actual ideas on the table that you see for increasing our region's environmental sustainability? We need to make that change, and the time is now. I like the saying to tread lightly, and that can be applied to a whole range of different industries, or and that's limiting and reducing things down to how are we exploiting or using the environment. So whether it's resource extraction, whether it's driving, whether it's
participating in these kind of consumerist types of activities. So I think as individuals, we can be conscious consumers and start thinking about the sort of morals and ethics around how we impact on the environment. And so it's really easy in this region to do that because you can kind of see what you do. You can choose to buy products abroad or locally. So supporting local economies, local markets, that type of thing. But yeah, do you guys have any thoughts?
So, I think two quick practical things that we could do. At first blush, they're going to strike you as wildly extravagant, but if you actually think about the long-term cost of this and actually the savings that accrue, we have terrible housing stock in this country. When I moved here, I was shocked about the quality of housing stock. And that extends to commercial buildings as well. If we insulated every home and put double glazed windows in every home, we would have tremendous savings in this country in terms of environmental impact, public health consequences. This should be a major priority. We have a new government in place. With the type of promises they've made, I'm surprised something like this hasn't been a major focus. I understand it's expensive on the front end, but we have to think about long-term implications of our decisions. It's not all short-term. The other quick thing is, again, for us here, a vertical density community, right? Here in Nelson, we are hemmed in by the sea and hemmed in by the hills. We are naturally set up, right? The land, Miriana today was talking about what does the river say? What does the land tell us? The land tells us we need to have a compact vertical city which allows us to, again, make modal shift in transportation. It allows us to have a higher quality standard of living because then we focus on placemaking in that vertical community. We have to embrace this. And this goes back a little bit back to the other question too. Why don't these things happen? To some degree, because if you read submissions to council, which I know it's a very perverse thing that I do that, but they're overwhelmingly naysayers, right? Overwhelmingly the naysayers are represented. And second of all, I'm sure you guys have read stuff or whatever, the comments section. It's just people slagging other people off all the time, and so that's the level of civil discourse. And of course it scares people from participating, and we don't create a positive culture for change, right? When people come and talk about change, we have to not be silent about supporting, even if we don't fully agree with them. If we want transformational change, we have to be vocal in supporting them.
A lot of support for that. So, question from Judine Edgar, which is regarding the strategy, and also I'd like to note there are a number of questions regarding the strategy project, and so I appreciate that many of you, this will be your first introduction to the project. What I'm going to do is, because our panel won't be able to answer some of those specific questions about the mahi that's going on, what I will do is I'll make sure that I get to all of your questions in the live feed afterwards, okay? But I think this one is relevant for the panel, and it's from Judine, who's also here with us tonight. So Judine said, how do we ensure that the strategy, and I'll broaden that to say more widely the work we're doing, has legs so that we get real action from our councils, businesses and communities to make a real difference today, tomorrow and for the future?
We make the engagement as inclusive as possible, and I think this is what these sorts of things are about, is if we can show that there is a different way of doing things and that there is merit in looking in the medium to long term, then it creates a safe place for all of us to move towards. And I think, back up some of what Richard was talking about, I think that there is, people don't feel safe to have an opinion. People don't feel safe to speak out loud and to try and influence around that. But when we're all aiming towards goals or aspirational targets that are a little bit beyond our normal term of thinking, then it should empower people to be more collective. It should empower people to be more collaborative. So that's what.
Just one quick thing there is, we have a highly polarized council here in Nelson. Something needs to be done about that, either a change in the mindset of the people who are there or a change of people. I'm not sure which is the right solution. We have this ludicrous idea that Richmond and Nelson, Tasman and Nelson are different communities and are operated differently. We really have to work on that collaboration and commonality, seeing our commonality and operating from that. I have political opinions, I have philosophies, but the reality is, if I want to move this community forward, I have to put those somewhat to the side and accept other people who have a different point of view from me and figure out how we're going to work together, because the only way it's going to happen here is if we stop this kind of pointless division, polarization, fragmentation that is stopping us from moving forward as a community.
All right, so I'm going to ask you all to answer this one, and it's the final question from the audience before we get into our big idea pitches for Te Tauihu. So this one is from Karen Lee, and very much aligned with the previous questions. Great to see some real consistency there. The mood is very clear, I think, of people in Te Tauihu at the moment. So Karen asked, how do we shake ourselves out of the status quo?
Oh, wow. Actually, can I come back to that?
For me, it just comes down to urgency. Like there's a lot of things that we kind of let go day to day, week to week, and we think that other people are going to resolve it or other people are going to provide solutions. But I think collectively we just need to have a lot more urgency. And I think, like, it hasn't been talked about tonight, but climate change is a perfect example of that. It shouldn't be seen as a change, it should be seen as a crisis, because then people have to provide a solution. They have to do something other than what they're doing now, and so that creates a sense of urgency, a sense that something is going to happen. And I think, like, a lot of the challenges that we have around us, we all know fundamentally that we need to change, but it's hard, and I think that we aren't going to be able to do it without being a lot more collaborative, a lot more focused on how we can work together to get to that point. So, yeah.
I know you said it well.
I think it comes down to building robust relationships and, dare I say it, trust. It's really important that, that you can work together with a whole range of people, which is really touching on what you're saying around ensuring there's diverse views at the table. So it's pulling away those types of barriers, and also, like as I said earlier, it's stepping outside of your comfort zone. So we have touched on that a little bit about the safety to do so. And I know that there's been times where I've been like, "Ooh, that's not right," and standing up for what you believe in, really. And you kind of need a bit of a whānau behind you to do those types of things. So it's really about building, strong relationships with those people, and trusting that, it's going to work out in the end. But if we are going to start doing this type of collaboration, it's standing outside of your comfort zone, and that's and doing something that you strongly believe in. Yeah.
So, our high quality of life sort of anesthetizes us, doesn't it? It lulls us into sleep, and the beautiful sun that we love for our community, metaphorically speaking, it's a case of sunstrike. It blinds us from really looking at ourselves clearly.
Excellent. Well, that concludes the panel for this evening. So I'm feeling very inspired by your contributions, and I know there's been lots of nodding and echoes of agreement in the audience as well. Obviously, this conversation will continue onto social media. We have another panel on Wednesday as well. But for the last part of this section, we're inviting a few big ideas for Te Tauihu. So when you came in, a big part of this strategy is about being the catalyst for other people to bring ideas to the table and to give them a platform to share those. So tonight we have a very captive audience, and we have a large audience online as well. And there's been a few people who have put themselves forward to share their big ideas. If you've got something that's brewing for you, though, there are, of course, the canvases out the front as well that you can capture those on, or you're welcome to reach out via our Facebook page or website if you'd like to be a part of future panels and share some of those ideas. But for now, I'm going to let the panel go and give them a big round of applause for their contributions. Excellent. So, in terms of, definitely take your wine with you. So, in terms of the pitches, we have 3, and these will be very brief pitches, and obviously we'll invite you to hang around for a drink afterwards and discuss these further. So, first up, I'd like to invite Stu Robertson of Tasman Bay Guardians.
Kia ora, bro. Kia ora koutou, ko Stu Robertson, tōku ingoa. I represent Tasman Bay Guardians whānau. Kia ora, Megan. Right, yeah. I just want to pitch a bit of an idea we've got about the bay, our moana, Titai o Aorere. It's a draw card for most of the people who are coming to visit our region, and it sustains and connects us all. Unfortunately, it's in a bit of trouble, and it's been in a bit of trouble for quite a while. The biggest issue is really the sediment that's come from the land, and the way we've disturbed the land, especially since about the 1850s, has caused the seabed to essentially be smothered by mud. And there used to be a lot of things living down there that were encrusting organisms, so coral reefs, mussels, oysters, and they provide food and habitat for our important fish species. We've also got Hector's dolphins, king shags, some very nationally and internationally significant species. And unfortunately, we're not really doing a great job of caring for them. So only about 1% of Tasman Bay is protected in any way, which means the rest of it is open to all sorts of extraction and activities that we do, which are part of our primary industries and tourism and dredging of the harbour and all these sorts of things. They have an impact on the bay. Everyone's got a different opinion, of course, and so what we need to do is try and get a collective of people together from all different walks of life who are concerned with the bay and form a Tasman Bay Protection Group. So this has actually been started by the Nelson Biodiversity Forum group that I'm in. There's a group of us who are just getting the ball rolling for some sort of protection crew, and it's really important that we engage anyone with an idea or a passion or an opinion, treaty partners, government, to get together. It's happened all over the world. The Great Barrier Reef is a perfect example, and it controls the inputs into the ocean and how we behave within the ocean, and how we can actually separate these activities out with protected areas, customary harvests, recreational, commercial. Involves a lot of hard conversations, a lot of deep thinking, and stepping outside our comfort zone. But I think it's really important that we need to do this, and we need to do it quickly. And we can use the knowledge from the Sustainable Seas Science Challenge, a new alliance, the Kotahitanga Mō Te Taio Alliance, designates that we need to do this for the ocean in that bit of paper. So if we don't want it to just be a bit of paper, we actually have to take action now. So if we want to be good ancestors, I think it's a good idea. So give me a call if you're interested.
Excellent. And next up we have Vienna. And this idea has come out of the Top of the South Youth Hui that she'd like to share with us.
Thank you. Right. Kia ora koutou, ko Vienna tuku ingoa. I'm 16, I go to Nelson College for Girls, and recently I joined Young Labour Nelson. I joined because I'm very passionate about politics and caring for the environment. I'm very excited that today we are getting rid of plastic bags. I really try to do my bit for the environment on a daily basis. This includes simple things like carrying around a keep cup and a metal straw. I also elected not to get my license because I want to reduce my carbon emissions. Instead, I bus, walk, or get rides with others. This has made me feel better about not contributing to the climate crisis that faces our world today. My friends and I made a petition to try and pitch to the TDC, the Nelson City Council, and the Marlborough City Council. We're currently at 340 signatures, and our goal is 5,000. This just doesn't affect the younger generation. It also impacts a lot on the elderly. A lot of them in Stoke are struggling to get in and out of town to get to banks and soon the post office, especially in the winter. This is a serious thing that we need to think about. So it would be great to have your support and sign the petition. It's on change.org, or you can contact Johnny, who will send it around. Thank you.
Excellent, and we'll circulate that on your behalf on the page as well, on the streams. That's cool. So the last one, and it was an impromptu one, so thank you. Is he still around, Joe Rainey? Yes. So if you'd like to come down, and this idea was shared with us in the break based on a great segue from the conversations that we've been having. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Johnny. You're nothing like impromptu. Thank you so much. I'm Joe Rainey, and I've recently retired from a career with Trade and Enterprise, working in economic development for 16 or 17 years. And what an exciting event this is. Brilliantly emceed, thank you, Johnny, and all the contributors to it. It's really great to see this happening. I've seen it all before. You know, I really have. I'm sitting next to another senior sustainability practitioner, and I can recall when the EDA was set up in 2004. At vast expense, the city and the region invested with some Wellington consultants and created the Centre for Sustainable Development. And you know, I can hear these conversations in a slightly different form having been said so often before. I think we are too comfortable. We are now being woken into action by our dear friend Greta from Sweden and our grandchildren. This has made me, in a lot of respects, a born-again 34-year-old. And I really feel that in a city the size of Nelson and a region the size of Tasman, we are small enough to do some great new stuff, but we've got the capability with our people and our scientists and the people who've chosen to live here. Richard, thank you so much for your contribution tonight, and the other panellists. Richard was quoting a lot of data which is available to describe our current condition and the trends that are occurring. It behoves all of us to understand this data. This data is actually what we're causing by living in the physical environment that we choose to live in, and going down the economic path that we choose to support every day through our transport choices, our purchasing choices, how we choose to live. We are the consumers, we are the ones making the difference. Okay, we're a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the global population, but we can make a difference. My point, and I am coming to it, thank you, Johnny, is to be concise in this. We're facing new physical constraints. For the first time in human history, the physical constraints that we have altered are coming to impact us in ways we simply have to address. Yet, very few of us understand those economic measures, the physical measures that we really should understand. I remember providing a short lecture to the Cawthron about 12 years ago on energy. And interesting that tonight there was scant discussion about energy use in our region, which raises a point. I think we need a repository of unquestionable scientific data about our region that no one can argue about because it's a fact. We've got great science, yet still we have people disagreeing with some of the stuff that we're hearing about. This happens in Facebook and in commentary all the time. Did you know that we use, as a region, twice the national average of liquid fuels per capita? We are very, very dependent on imported fuel. Yet that wasn't discussed once tonight. We import 90% of our electricity. We're very poor on production of electricity. We're energy poor, yet we're also the largest exporter per capita, GDP of exports per capita, of any region in New Zealand. So we're highly dependent on imported energy to drive our economy. Now, if we don't understand that, we just don't understand it. I argue for a repository of incontrovertible data, probably held by the EDA or some other entity that we can all refer to in all the different parts of our work. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, Joe, and thank you to everyone for sharing their ideas, and to the panellists tonight. It takes a lot of courage to get up here in front of not only the audience tonight, but also everyone online as well. We will be, keep an eye out for the Facebook page, because we will be releasing a video summarising some of this conversation. The live stream is also available, but more importantly, we have another event on Wednesday in Blenheim. So the conversation on Wednesday is focusing on sustainability. We have a really stellar lineup for that. It's at the Marlborough Convention Centre. Dr. Bruce Campbell, who's here with us tonight, Jan Hania, who many of you will know from Mapua and the Next Foundation, and Fiona Van Peetgem from Blenheim as well. So for those of you who are keen to make the trip, and I know a few of you who are, I got added to a group today of people organising ride sharing over to Blenheim, so it's great to see how actively people want to participate in this conversation. For those of you who don't want to do that, of course, we will have another live stream available. So that's all I need to say. I'm going to hand it over to Barney Thomas to close for the evening. I just want to say a big thank you for your participation and engagement this evening. This is just the beginning. I'm looking forward to having you on the rest of the road show. Awesome. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Ko te mea tuatahi. Nā mihi e te tauhou ki tēnei wā. Happy New Year to you all. E te matarihi, kei waina nui o tātou. Anō reira, Johnny, tēnā koe. E tō mahi runga nui kei waina nui o tātou. Anō reira mi noi tātou. E tō mātou matanui te rangi, e te atua ka harawa, whakanonga mai ki a mātou ho mai tō wairua, e te manaaki tanga, e raro e te korua te rangi mari e, ake. Amene. Ka pai.
Can we get tunes?
Yep, we're getting there. Scanning it.